Hello and welcome to the Varietal Show. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page, which is a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And what we do here on the Varietal Show is we play games that lead to writing. In this case, it'll be a solo tabletop RPG called Grimoire, which we played the first part last week. Not absolutely essential that you watch the first part. It depends on how much you care about the development of the character and the rules entailed in the game, because we basically just built the character last week. As far as me, I aim to get through at least a round of this game, which does require me to explain a few more mechanics, but we will be getting to the spell creation. Now, if you are not watching this live, two things. First of all, down in the description below, there will be timestamps, so you can jump ahead to whatever part of this process interests you the most. We're going to be going through some of those rules first, so if you don't care about any of that, you can jump ahead to when we start writing. Or if you just want to know what we come up with, you can jump ahead to the end and there will be a timestamp for that. If you're here live, you can go and join us in the live chat and give your recommendations. I try to work in as many as I get, and there's already a little crop of potatoes growing in there. I see you there. Zombie Wolf Witchery, GS, Tammy Morelli, Jum's Store. Thank you very much for watching. And if you're lurking, thank you very much for lurking. The last video did weirdly well. I'm not sure what drew people in. But it always makes me nervous, so let me add a caveat here. I realize the advertising for this can make it seem like I'm going to describe how to mechanically create spells for 5e or Pathfinder 2e or something like that. I will loosely reference that in the end if I don't forget how you could make these spells mechanically relevant. But to be clear about what the game's goal is to give us a story behind some spells, and it has a system to that end. So I mentioned that just to make sure that people know what this is about. It's a storytelling solo tabletop RPG where you take on the role of a sort of Mordenkainen, a person who wants to create spells. So you decide if that's what you're out for. As far as like mechanically, I'll say very briefly, the way that you homebrew stuff, unless you have the knowledge to go and do playtesting and look at all the probability curves and the spreadsheets behind a lot of tabletop RPGs, unless you're willing to go that deep with it, my advice is to find the closest equivalent spell mechanically to what you want to do and recast it with one of the spells you come up with in this game. I see that Jump Store has a return of the migraine monster, and I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope that you heroically defeat it very soon. I also hope, by the way, Witchery, that you're feeling better. I know that you had said that you were having a bit of a rough time. Yeah, I really hope, well, I don't know. I hope someone made you a sandwich at least. We were discussing that last time. I see Zombie Wolf made it. Perfect timing, Zombie Wolf. I was a bit late today. Not for any good reason. I just kind of zoned out and didn't realize I was past the start time. And Tammy's back from their vacation, which sounded awesome. I'm glad to hear it. Okay. Let's get to the game. This part of the show is called litgames. Litgames stands for literature games, and it's my catch-all title for a variety of categories of sort of indie solo tabletop RPGs, whether that's lyric games, solo tabletop RPGs, so on and so forth. Mostly stuff from itch.io, but not exclusively. But the game that we're playing today is one that we played last week, so if you really want to know all the rules of this game, I would encourage you to watch last week's show. If you're not too concerned about that, you mostly just want to see the flow of the game, this is probably the better one to watch, because we're going to be discussing how to play. Now, the game is called Grimoire. You get it off of itch.io. You might be able to get it other places, but that's where I found it. if I don't forget, which I constantly forget, and I feel very bad, I should have a pinned comment down below when the video is no longer live that lets you know where you can get this game, give you the link and whatever else. I don't have any relationship to the creators, to be clear. I just play these games. Okay, I just realized unplug my phone in. Okay. Witchery says, I am unfed, barely watered, and grumpy, but I did make it. Oh, come on. Somebody feed Witchery. Zombie Wolf says, hashtag relatable, Roy. I often zone out last minute only to suddenly recall what I was supposed to do and jump up with the gas of, oh, sugar, honey, iced tea. All right. So a brief reminder where we were left off here. We created a character last week, and we created 3 people he knew, 4 people he knew rather. 2 people were friends, 2 people were enemies, and they are associated to suits of a card deck. So in order to play this game, you do need a card deck, and you do need the jokers. You need the red and black joker. Since I don't really have a red and black joker, but I do have one joker that has red on it and one that doesn't. That's how I'll handle that. You need those. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we organize the deck in a minute. But it's mostly pulling cards and then you get prompts. There is some dice rolling in here. Most of it is optional. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that too, Zombie Wolf. It says, I say that we'd all make you Witchery a sandwich in spirit, but that's not very filling and nutritious. No. I think I could make a good chicken salad sandwich, which, as I recall, was one of the types you liked. Witchery says, oh no, the cards. Witchery doesn't like too much additional stuff on our tabletop RPGs. Okay, we also associated the diamonds to certain values. Which I'll admit, it seemed like the chat had a better understanding of how that played in than I did. I will warn you that what was true last week is true this week. I do still struggle to understand some of the passages in this book, but we'll get through it. Anyways, our character was Hydrenius the Spark. I'd said that I was going to explain how they got the name as like the bit that I wrote last week, and then I didn't, and I think at this point I'm past that line where I could really make use of it, so maybe it'll come up later. Their goal is to find a way to prevent the endless winter prophesized to bring ruin to his people, which was mostly what I wrote about. The 4 friends that we had is Platonian the Ancient, who's an investor, an old friend of our father's who runs a series of vineyards, and he believes our work as creating spells could allow him to control the weather and temperatures around his vineyard and outgrow his competitors. Solnura the Silent is one of our enemies. They are an assassin hired by some powerful figure in the political establishment that my project, my spellbook, threatens. Rakamir the Grumpy is a dining friend, like we go and eat stuff with him a lot, and is a pioneer of the satiating arts, so magic, and aroma design. And then finally, our last foe is Krafeld the Diviner. He's our rival. He disagrees with our using natural forces for magic and believes this to be heresy. Instead, thinks all magic should echo a divine source. Okay. I'm going to reread the text that I wrote last time so that we can get our head back into that space. And it was a pretty short amount of text. The first time Hydrenius heard the prophecy of the Everwinter, he stayed awake for 3 days, terrified about all he might lose to it. until he finally collapsed in exhaustion and slept with his head on his mother's lap for 16 hours. At least, that is how he tells it. Whether every detail of this story is true, one can never be sure. Hydrenius, or Hydra to his friends, was a talented wizard but an insecure person, prone to lies that emphasized his endless distress in all pursuits. Nevertheless, what we could know with certainty just by looking upon his life's direction is that the prophecy of the Everwinter truly did disturb the boy. The prophecy itself was an old one. It stated that in a 10-year period, the seas would begin to freeze longer and longer each winter until finally all water would be as stone. And all grass would be wilted in the frost. It particularly hung on the mind of the young Hydra because in the year he'd heard it, I'll just leave the sentence. That's too structurally problematic to fix on a stream. This is not a good sentence. The sea for the first time returned a tide of slush. It's like everything's out of order in that sentence. It was debatable what caused the tide, for the 10 caused the frozen tide. Freezing tide? It wasn't frozen. For the 10-year freeze did not manifest. What the hell is this sentence? Okay, it was debatable what caused the freezing tide. Though it definitely could not have been the Everwinter. The sea remained unfrozen the following winter, in contrast to the prediction of the doom prophecy. But Hydra was convinced and already pursuing the natural magics, was convinced of the imminent threat. Already began his pursuit. This is not what we're supposed to be doing right now, of the natural magics. Hydra saw them as the path to resurrection, a counter to the prophecy. Hydra saw the magics, this magic, as a path to resurrection, a counter to the prophecy he feared so inevitable. Though the days grew colder as he finished his schooling, there was no indications of the Everwinter's arrival in that time. Still, fear is a bond as strong as any, and one disinterested in consideration. Fear was also a powerful motivator, and in his obsession, born of nightmares, Hydrenius began work on the grimoire to break the Everwinter. This is the tale of how he wrote the seminal work of the rune, seminal work that ruined much of his life. Because that is sort of the gist of the game. Troy says, sitting up is constant pain, and I feel like I'm going to pass out. That sounds pretty serious. Are your lungs okay? Zombie Wolf likes taking care of people. I am a nurturer by nature. Yes, that is true. I get the impression a lot of the people in chat are that way, actually. Okay. That's where we're at in the story before I got myself off track. We left off in the book talking about the sort of resources and bonds. Bonds are friends and foes. So, oh, it's been that way for years. My spine is disagreeable. I have a bunch of neck injuries from a variety of incidents in my life. So yeah, I can relate to that, but it doesn't sound like it's as severe as that. It's just sort of a constant thing. Anyways, during a game of Grimoire, you'll be required to manage resources to conduct research. Now, I will tell you guys right now, we probably won't get too deep into that because ultimately we're here to get prompts for writing. While I do enjoy the game aspects, I do find that the gamiest game aspects don't always work on the stream, so we'll see how it goes. But at the very least, we need coins, which is just gold. There's no limit to how many we can hold. Wounds. Once we sustain 3 wounds, the next wound ends the game. They can be psychological, emotional, or physical. Corruptions is like crazy madness. You know, we're studying magic. It warps our mind and we go crazy. And it's the same story. It's a different form of wounding. You get 3 corruption. The 4th one drives you mad, and that's the end of the game. You can do things to heal. You can do things to help with corruption. You can do things to gain money and stuff. We'll look at the actions. That's our focus this episode. Which, by the way, I will add, the intention here with the setting up games over 2 episodes and whatever else and doing some writing is that now I can cycle back and jump in and do just sort of focus on the writing with the group and building out the characters. Like, you know, we'll go back to the Solar Punk one, whose name I can't remember, but what's new about that? I can't remember names ever. You know, we'll go back to, well, there's a few that I'm thinking of going back to. Yeah, Witchery, in January of this year, I think I actually ended up having to cancel a bunch of streams and stuff, but in January of this year, I had so much coughing that it was starting to hurt my ribs as well. It's the worst feeling, and it was really dry. Though after 3 tests over several days, it didn't say it was COVID, so I don't know what it was. Okay. Playing the game. Now, I'm going to read a little bit through this. Some of it is, even though I read it today, I feel like I don't remember it all. But I discovered, and I wish this was like at the front of the book. I know that's a weird thing to do conceptually, but I do think it's a good idea that if you're going to put quick play stuff, summaries of your game in your book, I think the place to put it is at the beginning. Because a person will look at it and they'll go, I don't know what this means or what this means. And it's more structured on how they read the rules, but they see the overall picture of it. I think that would be one thing that would have helped me. Because it still has references, page references to the quick guide at the end of the book. So it's easy. Okay, let's talk through how we play. Your wizard is researching the humming of the ley lines in the hope of discovering spells that can help them achieve their desires. When you play Grimoire, you choose from a list of actions for your wizard to undertake. Each action is facilitated by a different procedure, but all use the same deck of playing cards that sometimes refer to specific tables to generate prompts. And then it tells you how long you can take to play the game. I think you already know. Okay. So the first thing we have to do, which I did do last week, and then I think I might have messed it up a bit, is you have to separate out the face cards. So like kings, jacks, queens. You have to separate out the face cards from the rest of the cards. So let me make sure. Oh, maybe they are still. Okay, I have a couple of ones mixed in, but for the most part, let me just make sure I've got all the face cards out. King of Diamonds, Queen of Spades, King of Clubs, Jack of Clubs. You don't hit the power button. Queen of Diamonds, Queen of Hearts, Hearts, Clubs, Diamonds. X. Spades, rather. And hearts, yeah. Okay. So it did. I don't know why I thought I got it mixed up. Okay, so you separate out the face cards. Shuffle both decks. I'm going to shuffle the face cards. And then I'm going to shuffle the rest of the cards. This is our face card pile. Face down, you don't want to know what's in it. And I believe in this deck, the one that's all not face cards, is where the jokers go. I believe. Let me double check that. Well, it doesn't say. So, hopefully, I'm remembering that correctly. You know what? Rather than just be wrong on the internet, let's look up Joker here. Yeah, Joker cards are like unexpected ends. But what deck is it in? I'm pretty sure a deck of playing cards in both. Does it just not tell me, or am I misremembering? I'm sorry, this is not compelling. Shuffle the Joker under any. I'm pretty sure it's just in the main pile. That's how I'm gonna play it. Sorry for the delay. Okay. Shuffled. Face cards separated. Main cards there. The shuffling has been done. Now comes the time. And where we look at the actions. Okay. Yeah. There we go. Okay. Each turn you select one of the following actions for your wizard. So I'm going to tell you guys the actions because when we come around to our first round here, you guys are going to have to pick what action we take. So first off, consort. You take to the world outside of your study to hopefully meet with a friend, however you are just as likely to run into a foe. This action will allow the player to interact with their wizard's bonds. Bonds often provide helpful bonuses, depending on the set, but at the risk of triggering a foe, which can be debilitating. So you draw a card from the deck. Use the suit of the card to determine which friend or foe you find, because remember we associated them to the clubs, hearts, things like that. If none apply, then discard the card and terminate the action. 3, discard the card, respond to the prompt generated with that card at the respective friend or foe prompt table. So we can choose to go out and use the suits of the card to tell us something about the person. And then depending on who we run into, we might wind up with gold or a wound or something like that. So that's our first action, chat. Note it mentally. We can consort, which means socialize. Discover. You purchase, happen upon, or uncover a magical artifact. Perhaps it was lost beneath the extraordinary piles of wizard stuff in your study. What is our wizard stuff? This action will allow the player to begin a new spell by drawing and playing a face card. A player may have multiple spells under research at a time, which can help reduce the risk of research. Yeah, we'll get to the spell creation, but it involves creating a little mini deck of cards. So in order to discover, we remove 2 coin. Well, we don't have any coin right now. You can get coin by consorting, and you can get coin by one of the actions that's coming up. Draw and play a face card to start a new set. which is a set. It just means a series of cards. When we have the right combination of cards, we will complete a spell. And when we complete a spell, we make a glyph for it. We use the book, which, as I'll remind you, we're using My Indian Summer by Joseph Gego-Winniganism. And I'll show you. The book tells us there's a process for using that book to discover the nature of the spell we create. Yeah, that's the whole thing, but we got to make a spell first. Heal is exactly what it sounds like. You pay 1 coin to remove 1 wound. Perform. You are desperate for coin, so you take on menial work. This action will allow the player to gain a coin at the risk of burning cards or losing progress on spells. It can be helpful in a pinch, otherwise other actions might be better. So you draw a card from the deck. If the suit of the drawing card matches the last card added to a spell, discard all matching cards, otherwise only discard the drawing card. Which means there's a risk. What they're saying there is if you're working on a spell and you want to gain a coin, you run a risk then, based on what the work is, of forgetting or losing your progress on a spell entirely, which is frankly brutal. Remember that less cards in the deck will result in more Joker cards that will be drawn, which means the game will likely end sooner in a way that's not positive for your wizard. Yeah, so basically, Joker cards, the 2 colors, every time you pick one up, it gives you a little prompt, and then I think it's 3 times, and when you run across the same Joker card the 3rd time, you get some unfortunate, unexpected ending. And as you sort of pull cards out, that deck gets smaller. Carrying on with the actions. Quest. You venture out into the world to support your studies on a spell. This action will be one of the primary actions taken to produce journal prompts? Journal prompts. Journal prompts. I'm turning the air conditioning on. My apologies to headphone users. The heat. It's getting to me. It will allow the player to exchange coin to undertake a brief adventure composed of a series of prompts. It provides a more flexible way to add to spell sets at the cost of a more dire journal prompt consequences and a greater number of discarded cards. So, we need to have coins to quest. We don't currently have coins. This action will be one of the primary actions taken to produce journal prompts. It will allow the player to exchange coins to undertake a brief adventure. So in other words, we go out and do some sort of research or something like that. It allows us to find stuff that we can add to spell sets. But because we're out questing, are going to get riskier prompts. So to do that, we need a coin. And since we don't have a coin, I don't think it's worth me reading the rest of this right now. Research. You conduct research into the humming of the ley lines with the hopes to translate a new spell. This action will be the other primary action to generate journal prompts. It will allow the player to add to a spell set of their choice with their minimal risk, only risking some corruption if the card drawn would otherwise ruin the spell. So to do that, we just draw a card from the deck. It has no cost other than a potential, we have a potential to gain 1 corruption, depending on the card we draw. Respond to the prompt generated by that card by using the suit and rank in the research prompt table. Okay, I already explained Jokers. So I know I lost your attention there, so let me do this quicker and a quick review, because this is the core of what we're doing today. Each time we start like an entry in this journal, we have to pick an action. Some actions have costs. Some of those costs are paid up front, so we're locked out of them right now because we have no money. Some of those actions have a cost out, like causing a wound or causing madness or whatever else. So consort is how we meet bonds, which can be enemies or friends. Meeting friends will give us gold and allow us to pay for quests where we can get some cards to make spell sets. But it also means that we might run into our enemies who are going to cause wounds. So Consort is a way to get enemies and their wounds, or friends and their gold. Discover is basically we pay a bunch of money. 2 coin is quite a bit of money in this game. And then we get to start a set. Which, whenever they say set, they mean like a spell. Start the progress of making a spell. We can heal as an action, which is just we lose a coin, we lose a wound. We can perform, which is work. We do menial jobs. It runs the risk of us losing an entire spell set, but we do gain 1 coin. So we're probably going to be doing that first, honestly. Quest requires us to have money, but it does give us stuff to build spells out of. And research does not require us to have money, but there is a risk that we'll draw a card that we can't use. And if we draw a card that we can't use for one reason or another and discard it, we will gain 1 corruption and 3 corruption, and we lose. Okay, so research, quest, perform, heal, discover, and consort. Those are the actions that make up the core of the game. They each have their own little procedure, and they each generate prompts. Okay. I may as well tell you how we create a spell. But I'm going to do it briefly because obviously if we get to the point of creating a spell, we will... I may just fudge it a bit and make it that we create a spell because I want to go through that process. If we reach the point, anyways, we'll go more detail on this, but a spell is represented by a series of cards called a set, a series of words, an offering, and a glyph. So a series of playing cards that we will put together that have to add up to a certain value. A series of words we pull from our chosen novel, an offering, which is, you'll see, and a glyph, which has some prompts, but I'll have to draw in my little book. Normally I'd draw that on the stream, but my laptop can't run that many programs right now. So a set begins when a face cover card is played to the table when you discover. So we have to use the discover action to start research into a spell. To use the discover action, to remind you, you need 2 coin, which we don't have. But you can earn 1 coin per turn by performing or doing work, menial work. You craft your spell as you add cards to the set. When you research or quest, which I've already discussed those actions, every card will shape the glyph of the spell, but only 3 cards will shape the spell itself. The face card determines how many spell points are required, and it gives you the little translation down here. Spell points means that the total of the set cards that you get after that needs to add up to that. If we go over it, it fails. First number card determines the words of power, and the last number card determines what value of your wizard is used as a lens to interpret the words of power, which is a thing. If we get to it, we get to it. Once the value of each card, aces are ones in a set, sums to the required number of spell points as per the table below, the spell is considered complete. If a set would ever exceed the number of spell points required, discard all the cards in that set. You have failed to comprehend the humming of the ley lines. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to you. It does make sense to me. I will say this part of it has always made sense to me. You take a discover action, you pull from your face card set, and depending on the one you pull is the total value you need the rest of the cards you pull from the random set to equal as you try to build your spell. Okay. You can see why I split this over 2. Now, with all of that said, I think we're just about to the point where we can play. I'm not going to tell you how to create a glyph until we get to the point that we're creating glyphs. And we're not going to read prompts unless we are prompted. So let me go down to the quick play. So each turn, pick one of the following actions and execute the procedure. Consort, discover, heal, perform, quest, or research. We cannot discover because that costs 2 coins, so that's out. We don't need to heal because we have no wounds. We cannot quest because that costs 1 coin, and we have no coins. I don't think we can research because I think you can only research if you've used the discover action and have a set going. So basically my question boils down to, do you want chat to consort or perform? To put that in more standard parlance, do you want to go out into the world and socialize, potentially meeting enemies? Or do you want to do some menial work and gain some gold? So, chat. That's the question. Consort or perform? Perform is work. Consort is socialize. Both have the chance to give us gold. One for sure, one maybe. Okay. Consort or perform, chat. Tammy says gold, but we can get that by consorting or performing. Jia says menial things first. Okay, that makes sense. You know, we just got out of wizard school. We gotta do that intern work. Sorry, my headphone wire is a little worse for the wearer, so I keep fidgeting with it. There we go. Okay. Perform it is. And it gives a little quick thing down here. Draw a card from the deck, not the face deck. From the deck. The card we drew is a 3 of clubs. I think that's an enemy, unfortunately. So we're going to be starting with a wound. Hello, Big Drew. How you doing? I don't know what we're doing. Is it fun? It depends on how much you like gaminess of games. If you're not into some rule sets and resource management, maybe not. Okay. So 3 of clubs for our perform. It says if the suit of the drawing card matches the last card added to a spell, discard all cards, otherwise only discard the drawing card. But we don't have a spell going yet, so it doesn't matter, and we will gain 1 coin. So we need to... Does this entail any prompts? Now that I think about it, maybe it doesn't. Let me check. All this time, I'd assumed it would give me a prompt for menial work. Well, a prompt for everything, but now that I think about it, I don't think it's actually ever said that. Those are quest prompts. Those are research prompts. No, okay. Okay, we get to decide what the menial work is. Chat. What menial work? We're sort of dealing with a somewhat medieval fantasy setting here, I suppose. What is the menial work that a wizard would do? I will start typing, because we started with a very dramatic opening, and then we're going to be opening with him doing, you know, menial work. But I'm very curious what you folks will come up with for menial work. Long before any spells were written, though, Hydra was merely another cog in a machine that made his master money. Ooh. Witchery says organizing as many herbs and pieces of creatures. There's always bottles of strange things. I think this is work done for someone else because they're going to pay us gold. This is like clerk work or something. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. Like, is he a clerk at the magical regulation shop or something like that? Let me frame it better. This is sort of like fixing random broken medieval machinery. I like that. I like that. What if we said that, like, the glass, a lot of the lighting in the city were like magical glass orbs that were commonly cracked, and so you'd have to go around and cast this really menial mending spell that took a long time because to cast and to relight them. So he's basically a glorified lamplighter. Does that work for people, or do you guys want to build on that and do something else? I mean, I don't want to spend too long on it, but I want to make sure that people are feeling connected to the character in the game. He's the Secretary of Spell Evolutions. Oh. That works for me, Rory, says Zombie Wolf. Folks, let me know if you have something you want to add to it. His master was the city of... Did we ever name this city? Nope. Okay. What's the name of the city where Everwinter threatens? Big Drew says, so he brings the fire to the lantern and lamppost. No, it's not fire at all. It's like a glowing magic ball that expires, and then he has to cast a spell to relight it. His master was the city of, I don't know. GS says, sorry, that was a mean prompt on my part. No, it's not. There's no mean prompts. All ideas swilled together into the stew that is a story. God, that is in the top 10 worst things I've ever said. His master was the... Yeah, I like it. Frostvale. Was the city of Frostvale from Zombie Wolf there. Was the city of Frostvale's municipal lighting division. The outer farms all still used oil lamps, but in the city each lamp post was crowned with a light gem that emanated a magical glow. It was beautiful, and the light and the colors could be altered to any to those the colors could be altered to match the spirits of the city in any season. The drawback was they were quite Big Drew says Bidwell. That's a good one too. Remind me that if I need like a district name or something, I'll call it like the Bidwell district. Oh, I see actually, Big Drew, you put Tunsforth above it. Sorry, I didn't even see that. Yes. The drawback was they were quite fragile and often dimmed or cracked. Recent graduates. Oh, here's a chance. I'll use Tunsforth for the School of Magic. Recent graduates of the Tunsforth School of Magic. I don't know why my nose is so itchy today. Sandpaper. JS says, I love your lamp thing, Rory. I'm just rambling for the heck of it. Ramble away. Because sometimes you guys say something and maybe it's not the intended use of it. But then I wind up finding a place for it, right? Recent graduates of the Tunsforth School of Magic. Recent graduates of the Tunsforth School of Magic. Often interned in the role of effectively magical lamplighter. Not roll. Big Drew says, your nose is itchy because of allergies and smoke. I thankfully don't have seasonal allergies, but you might be right about the smoke. It's getting smoky here. The sun is turning that sickly shade of orange and brown. From forest fires. For those who don't know, I live in a rainforest. Recent graduates of the Tunsforth School of Magic often interned in the role of effectively magical lamplighter. It was a simple but tedious task of casting the same spell over the course of an hour, then moving to the next broken lamp to do the same. It was a rite of passage to many graduates. But to Hydra, it was an insult. To what? An insult and a waste of his precious time. To Hydra, it was an insult and a waste of his precious time. Folks of Frostvale, would speak kind words of greeting to the young wizard as he pouted about, casting his mending spell. And he would rarely respond, pretending instead to be mighty focused on the task at hand. Yeah. I don't really run my games like that anymore, Zombie Wolf, but I used to, and I used to have a bunch of different systems for coming up with names. But then the problem would be is if I came up with a name, I would forget my own name because I wouldn't write it down. I would be like, this NPC will never come back. And then something will come up where they're like, who is that NPC again? I need to go and see him. And I'm like, damn it. Was it Jerry? Jess says, I thought you said tongues forth, and I like that. Maybe we could make a joke about that later. Big Drew says, my home state is my nation's #1 priority now because we have 135 active wildfires. Wow. Including 5 megafires. I mean, we have quite a few active wildfires pretty much any summer in BC, but BC is huge. I don't think anybody quite appreciates how big a province is in Canada. If you started at the border of the US and you went north of us is the Yukon, drove straight to the northern border of the Yukon, so the long route of British Columbia. You could not do it in one day, first of all, unless you just never slept. I don't even think you could do it in 2. I think it would actually take close to 3 days. You could maybe do it in 2, but yeah, it would be long days. It's like 30 hours of driving or something like that to get from end to end in this province. Big Drew says Oregon. Oh yeah, so similar case. Lots of trees. Zombie Wolf says, mine is Washington. Pretty close to the Canadian border, actually. If I waved out my window, Rory might see. I'll say that my forays down to, I'm sure you've come up to Canada before, but I'll say in my forays down to Washington, it's basically British Columbia. Like it gets a little different in the south. I say it's basically, I mean the biome's the same. There's a lot of things that I see down there that I would never see in Canada, but yeah. Folks of Frostvale would speak kind words of greeting to the young wizard as he pouted about casting his mending spell, and he would rarely respond. The most anyone got was a grump, was a huff and nod. Mostly, though, he would just pretend to be mighty focused. I do like that, but it's kind of breaking the flow. Gia says, but with that California and heat in Oregon. Yeah, I was going to add that. It is drier and hotter than it is up here, but although at this point, for the people who live on the coast know this, but global warming has heated up the sea along the California coast, and one of the consequences of doing that is it's pushing California weather north. So we in BC have been getting hotter and hotter days for it. Obviously, not being equatorial, there's only so hot it will be, but it's more California than normal. Zombie Wolf says, I'm sure you've come up to Canada before me, who makes minimum wage working part-time. Yep, sure have, or totally. Well, I mean, is it expensive to come up here? I guess you need a passport, and that's not nothing. That's a few $100s or something like that. Yeah, if you don't have a car, it'd be a problem. Man, this background just wants to keep shutting off. He would just pretend to be overly focused on the task at hand. Witchery says, I have actual nightmares about the summer returning. I like the light. I like deserts visually, for example. But I'm really bad with the heat. I'm so bad with the heat. And the smoke is not fun. Mostly, though, he would just pretend to be overly focused on the task at hand. Hydra hated. Almost opened my own stream on my phone with my wrist bumping the screen. That would have been weird. Hydra hated, because it's a notification on my phone, just to make sure that it goes out. I check it that way. Hydra hated this menial work. But he needed the gold. Or his book of spells would never grow. And the Everwinter would bring its ruin. It's a car, oh, that's why. Well, you could do what I did to get to Coachella in like 2007, which is I took a Greyhound bus. Which, by the way, at least at that point, may as well be a different company I've figured out in that trip in Canada than they were in the States. Because I took a Greyhound bus from Vancouver down to Coachella Valley. Obviously, that's where Coachella is in California. And it was the worst trip of my life. The actual time in Coachella was amazing. I saw Rage Against the Machine, but the trip was a nightmare. Patrice says, I cannot visit Canada. Weirdly, the car doesn't work in the Pacific. Have you considered just going really fast off a pier? Maybe it'll skip like a stone. Can you imagine if you could drive on the sea, though? You wouldn't want to anyways. It'd just be hours of like... What am I talking about? Write the story, Rory. Zombie Wolf says, Rory, I said I was poor, not desperate. Well, I was poor and desperate. I couldn't afford a plane. And I wasn't going to miss what at the time seemed like the last reunion concert they'd ever do, which turns out was not. Big Drew says, I'm pretty sure the USD is a little stronger than the CAD. It's a lot stronger than our dollar. You guys got 30 cents on us. 11-meter waves. I mean, I do kind of wish I could drive on water. It would be fun to be on a dynamic surface, but you'd probably flip the car pretty quickly and probably die. But he needed the gold, or his book of spells would never grow. Bring its ruin. Here's a thought, chat, that I had. So we're doing perform right now, and we just gain 1 coin. So I'm going to add a coin to our coin pool. But here is the my proposal. Our next action, instead of setting it in a different day and time, what if we took the consort action and said that whatever card we draw was something that happened while we were working with the lamps in the street? Victory says, Rage Against the Machine is good reason to go anywhere. Rory, my hat's off to you. It was truly incredible. It was, I don't know, something like 200,000 people or something were there. It really felt like it was really good. Coachella at that point, I don't know what it is anymore, but at that point was a pretty cool place to be. It wasn't really exploitative, which was their shtick at that time. I don't know if that's still the case. I'm not stumping for them or anything. This was, oh my God, almost 20 years ago. I just realized that's horrifying. Yeah. I actually spent most of my time in the techno tent, which is where I discovered that I actually like a lot of techno. And that the techno I'd heard on the radio was a very small piece of a very large pie, because I didn't love the stuff on the radio, but the stuff I heard there I really liked. I saw, You got to be deep in the sauce with techno for this to mean anything. But I saw Soulwax perform night versions there. I didn't know who they were. It blew my mind. And that remains one of my favorite albums, Soulwax night versions. Night spelled N-I-T-E. I'm not necessarily recommending it. It is for a very particular type of person, but... Witchery says, Coachella is where all the influencers flock in outfits that are not suited for the weather. Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like that when I went there. I mean, there was a bit of that, but like influencer wasn't such a thing in like 2007, 2008, whenever I went. What do you think? Chat, do you think we should consort? See if we run into someone while we're working on the street? Big Drew says, Coachella for at least the last 5 years has been lousy. I look for the lineup every year. I mean, that might also just be us getting older, right? Like, even when I went, I think I was just on the bleeding edge of irrelevancy in pop culture. Yeah. I don't know. I do think that to some extent live rock concerts are a little bit a thing for the young. I remember the last time I went to a Queens of the Stone Age concert, which is my favorite band. And I've been to a lot of them. I've been to like 6 or 7. The last one I went to, I don't know, it was like over 10 years ago, but I remember standing in the crowd and thinking, I just wish I could sit down and watch the band. And I was like, oh, no, I'm old. Consort. Okay. People like the consort. Okay, we're going to draw a card. Well, it's an enemy. It's a 4 of clubs. So we're not getting any more coin. We're getting an injury. Let's see what we were associated to with clubs. I'm going to make a note of this page because I'm going to come back to it a lot. Page 66. Guess we're working late and we get some injuries. Big Drew says, are you calling me old? I mean, I'm getting there. We're old. We're definitely old. I don't know your exact age or anything, but I'm sure we are. I was watching some compilation of videos of like millennials getting in arguments with Gen Z using Instagram shorts. Like, come on, guys. Don't do that. Stop it. They're kids. Let them be kids. Yeah, they're going to think we're uncool because we're not cool. Let it go. We're old. Don't be something you're not. If you get up and go, my knee, then you're old. Witchery says, I faint if I stand up too long. I almost do that. There's a name for it, too. But that's because I'm tall as hell. But I think you said you were tall as well, Witchery. Zombie Will says, what I've learned from these streams so far, Rory's dice love him. Rory's deck hates him. This is true. Okay. Gotta get back to the bonds. It was spades. And we had picked the rival. Your foe called you out at the markets and tried to compete with you. How did you come to be harmed? Remember, harm can be emotional, mental, or physical. Our foe, I will remind you of the details of him. Witchery says, I'm 6'3". Yeah, there it is. There it is. We're nearly the same height. I'm a bit taller than you. But we're nearly the same height. That's what the doctor told me anyways. When you're really tall, it's really common to get this sort of positional orthostatic something or other. Victor says, I'm 6'8". Are you actually 6'8"? The way you say that makes me think that's not true. Okay. Witchery says they think they have the positional thing, but it's hard to get the doctor. Yeah, it's weird when you come to a doctor and you're like, here's the symptoms, and it looked like it matched up with this. It's almost like a point of pride for them that they don't want to, like, consider it until they've exhausted 10 other things. Pots, Rory. Yeah, I forget the name of it. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, Witchery, but I'm curious if you know where ethnically that height's coming from. Like, for me, it's almost certainly coming from, although there are a lot of tall Scots, I think it's probably coming from the Norwegian side of me. Zombie Wolf says, looks down at my 4'11" self and cries. Being tall is overrated. I will say that. I don't think it's pointless. I don't think it's like without its benefits. I'm not going to go that far, but it is a bit overrated. Nothing works for you, really. Chairs don't. Like, it's hard to take for granted that a lot of things work if you're shorter than it, because they kind of make stuff with kids in mind. But if you're taller than the average, a ton of things just don't work. Okay. Spade. Crafeld the Diviner. He disagrees with our using natural forces for magic and believes this to be heresy. Instead, thinks all magic should echo a divine source. Okay. So that's who we're going to run into in the street, folks. Crafeld the Diviner. He thinks we're heresy. He challenges us at a market. That's what it tells us. We're supposed to consider our values as well that we rolled for and assigned to clubs, and I just can't be bothered to do that. It's not very compelling to me. I like to figure out my character's values by writing them. Yeah, it's funny you should say that, Witchery, because I ran into that problem too. I was looking at like tiny house stuff, and I was like, none of this works for me. These beds are like a foot too short. Big Drew says, vertically challenged people have to deal with people thinking it's cute to pick them up and treat them like a child. That's true. But here's the thing. When you're tall, people are... you have to deal with people thinking that you're an appliance for their use. Okay, so our foe called us out at the markets, tried to compete with us. How did we come to be harmed by this? Okay, so Crafeld the Diviner, one who believes that all magical energy should come from divine sources, not natural sources like we're doing. Maybe a guy we knew in university, or something like that, or magic school, I guess we're calling it. We're working on a light. And Crafeld calls us out. What does he say? What is his grief with us today? Zombie Wolf says, I don't look my age. I look like a teenager, so children don't respect my authority as an adult and pick on me. Yeah, that is one of the benefits of being tall. People just automatically assign more authority to you. Which is a double-edged sword, of course, but yeah. What does Crafeld the Diviner say to us to pick this fight in the market? A magic fight that's going to harm us, and also how do we get harmed? Big Drew says, aren't you finished with that damn light yet? It's been 3 suns since it went out. I like that. Because then he can be like, that's what you get for using that kind of magic. My magic would have solved it in a day. Thanks, Big Drew. It was in this fugue state of angry muttering while wandering to the next cracked light orb. That Hydra heard the nasal screeching of old classmate and general jackass Crofeld the Diviner. Let's give him the actual name here. Crofeld Newton, or the Diviner, as he called himself. The screech was, of course, mockery. Yeah, I've noticed, Zombie Wolf, that HOAs, I'm not saying they don't exist in Canada, they definitely do, but they are not nearly as prevalent in Canada as they are in the States. And I don't know what informs that, because my outsider's perception is that America would hate having somebody tell you what to do with your own property. You know, isn't it all about liberty there? And then it's HOAs all over the place. Zombie Wolf says, Newton, seriously, where's your imagination gone today, Rory? No, you're missing the point, Zombie Wolf. It's supposed to be a really boring name. It's a joke. Crofeld Newton is like, I considered calling him Smith, so that him calling himself the Diviner has an ironic counterpoint of it's an early indication to the reader that this man is pumped up beyond his worth. Witchery says, I wish I was about a half foot shorter. I don't know that I want to be shorter. I do derive a lot of, like, some ideas about myself from being tall, but there are times. GS says, I got the joke. Oh, good. The screech was, of course, mockery. Oh, dear. Aren't you finished? That damn light yet? I guess it's tough to persuade the dirt of the earth to lend you power, because a diviner would have had the whole street done. Yeah, exactly, Zombie. Well, so where does the HOA come from? Hours ago. The most infuriating thing about Crofelds HRAs are a decent idea in concept. They are, but let's face it, like so many power structures, they become warped towards serving minority interests. The most infuriating thing about Crofeld's statement is it was technically correct. Infuriating thing 2. Hydra Zombie Wolf says, if I had to guess, England. I don't even know if England has a lot of HOAs. We don't have any English folk in our chat, so I have no one to ask. But I do hang out in a server that has a lot of English folk, so I could ask them. But I don't hear much about HOAs from them. It's a very American thing. And it's very strange to me because it just doesn't seem like a thing. Oh, is that what it is, Witchery? Oh, that would make sense. It's a poor reaction to civil rights. Yeah, you're probably right. Now that I think about it, that makes a lot of sense. The most infuriating thing to Hydra about Crawfeld's statement is it was technically correct. And to explain the nuance to the now curious crowd would sound like little more than defensive rambling and hair splitting. I did explain it up, chat. Sometimes I miss messages, Witchery. It's not your fault. People called Crawfeld crawfish behind his back. Perfect. Now I got a response to him. Zombie Will says it was just a joke, Rory. You know, I did think it might be a joke, but I have learned from being online for a long time that it's better to take people seriously. Because if you think something's a joke and it's not, you've insulted someone. If you think something isn't a joke, but you, or is a joke, but you treat it as a, can I get this sentence out? You know what I mean. If you think it the other way, you just look like a fool, which is the better option. But yeah, it's genuinely strange from a sociological perspective, because if you asked, well, if you ask like average Americans what's important, like things like liberty and property are very important, and then you're like the home of HOAs, which is entirely about how you don't entirely control your property. All right. This is getting weird. I'm going to go back to the story. Would sound like little more than defensive rambling and hair splitting. It was the worst kind of insult. Adding to this tension was the fact that Hydra was in city uniform. Zombie Will says, it's like I always say, I'd rather be a smartass than a dumbass. I think the formulation for me is more, I'd rather play the fool than make somebody else feel that way. Would sound like little more than defensive rambling and hair splitting. For example, well, it was true that drawing power from natural sources led to longer casting times. Doing some world building. It was generally a more stable and powerful form of magic. None of this would have mattered, though, to either Crawfeld or the market or the circling pedestrians. Or the pedestrians encircling them. I think I basically said the same thing twice, but whatever. It was the worst kind of insult. Technically correct, but overall wrong. The fact that Hydra was in city uniform and on the clock meant he couldn't just say whatever he wanted. As what he wanted to say was a fireable offense. Instead, with a smile stretched over gritted teeth, Hydra said, "You're welcome to do some civil service as well, crawfish." Though I'm sure you have several of your dad's parties to attend instead. Big Drew says, "I'm having a hungry time. What for dinner?" Well, if you're not tired, then I would say you should make that lasagna again you were talking about last time. But for me, my dinner tonight was brown rice, sweet potato. I say sweet potato, but in Canada, for some reason, just at random, we call yams sweet potatoes, which is not really how any other part of the world does it. Yams. Kale. Toasted kale, so it's like crispy. And crispy chickpeas with a bit of avocado, which is a little more California than I normally eat, but it's actually pretty good. You put honey mustard dressing over it. Mm-hmm. I will likely be having chicken and potatoes. How is the chicken prepared, and how are the potatoes prepared? And are you the one preparing them? Yeah, I was just gonna. Witcher says, "If I can stand." Yeah, I thought you were. That is unfortunate. Though I'm sure you have several of your dad's parties to attend instead. There was the hiss of whispers running through the crowd. A hiss of whispers ran through the cloud. Big Drew says, "I don't have the ingredients, but I'm on a keto diet. But lasagna sounds good. Keto is a good approach. Do I have any keto recommendations? Well, there's a lot of crossover between gluten-free and keto, I will say. Not that there should be, but there just is. Witchery says, "I am beyond cooking for flavor. We're just surviving." Sorry about that. Gia says, "I read that as having children and potatoes." That's Tuesday night. That's the folklore stream where we talk about eating children. A hiss of whispers ran through the crowd. Most of the banter. Witcher says, children and potatoes seems like more work than chicken. Yes. Zombie Will said, I Greek casserole known as moussaka. I made a vegetarian though, so it's not exactly authentic. Moussaka is. Sounds like the neighbors are arguing. Moussaka is delicious. I love moussaka. Sorry, I'm just muting so their yelling doesn't come through. A hiss of whispers ran through the crowd. Most of the banter. Most of the banter. Most of Hydra's insult seemed to fall flat. But everyone knew that Crawfeld hated being called crawfish. It was a stupid name that had followed him since childhood. Witchery says, in fairness, most dishes are authentically sometimes vegetarian. People used to eat a lot less meat. That is very true. Also, a lot of recipes that we consider like classic old recipes are like 200 years old at the oldest and become unrecognizable after that. Food history is weirdly just utterly rife with urban legends and folklore that even like journalistic sources repeat to this day. Food is not nearly what people think it is. I like the sort of acid citric tang of a lot of Greek food. That's what I like about Greek food. There was a tense moment where a chill wind blew in off the sea, and between the two men locked in a rageful stare. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he lit the last 3 lamps in as many minutes. Then he gave a smirk to the crowd and said, "Have pity for the boy. His mistake of natural magic robs him of the time to go to parties, I guess. But for me, I've done a day's work in minutes. So now it's time to do a day's worth of rest. Crofeld. Not Kreffeld. Jess says, may I suggest getting a ninja foodie witchery? Throw the food in and sit down while it cooks. Pressure cooks or air fries. I've heard good things about it. I'm not really an all-in-one kind of person, but as far as my machine, but yeah. Greek yogurt is good sauce. It is. And if you get skim Greek yogurt, it honestly tastes pretty much the same and has no cholesterol, which probably isn't a concern for most of you, but it is for some people in my house. Crofeld swaggered, not staggered. Swaggered off the crowd in tow as lowly Hydra stood under the lamps he lit, fuming with rage. Then, as was often the case with diviner magic, the orb burst. And dropped its leaded glass on his scalp. A wound that would turn to a scar and a forced part in his hair. Okay, we've done 2 actions. This game's moving along, isn't it? Gotta update my wounds. We have 1 of 3 wounds. We have 1 coin. Because of my height, benches are uncomfortable to use. It's common to be bears the whole way down. Yeah, benches are useless to people as tall as us. Okay, we go back to page 66. Order 66. And now we have some questions, chat. Now we have some questions. Zombie Wolf says, am I the only shorty in the chat? That's a good question. I don't know everybody's height, actually. Now that I think about it. Well, I do have somebody in my house who's 4'11". Okay, so chat, we have 1 coin, 1 wound. We still can't research because we don't have a spell set yet. We can't discover yet because we need 2 coins to do that, but I could fudge it. I could say we got 2 coins just so that we can move on and start dealing with the spells. Or we could play it honest and do our 1 coin and go on a quest. But, oh no, wait, I can't, because to go on a quest we need a spell set. Okay, here's what I'll do. I'll just do perform again. I'm drawing a card, but it doesn't matter because we don't have any spell sets. If I do a perform again, we will have enough to start a spell. Witchery says I was 5'9" at age 11. That's quite tall. I don't know how tall I was at age 11. I know I was always tall. I'll say that. But I did I did grow quite a bit once I hit puberty. Okay. Yeah, I remember in Jump Story you were on one of the extremes, and I couldn't remember which one it was, but apparently you're also on the shorter side. I'll just add this line for our additional gold. Much of the remaining weeks of summer were spent lighting lamps but now with the added misery of looking over his shoulder to see if Crawfeld was coming to disrupt his work. Finally, though, Zombie Wolf says, guess I'm still awaiting my puberty growth spurt. I mean, this is probably a corny and unhelpful thing to say, but what I will say is it takes all types, right? Like everybody's got good features and or not good features and bad features. Good outcomes and bad outcomes to their features. I don't know what that would be for you, but I know, there's benefits to being tall. Oh my god. Yeah, I do that too. Actually, Witchery was talking about riding in cars. I remember in high school, there was this girl's car that a group of our friends would drive around in. And she drove a Honda Civic. And there would be... she wasn't a very good person, I'll be honest. Not a thoughtful person, kind of mean, whatever else. Anyways, because I was one of the younger in the group, I just got pushed into the back, even though I was huge, and they were not tall at all. No one else in the car was nearly as tall as me. But what would happen is I would ride in the back, and I would have to straddle my knees around the seats, which would sandwich it between the frames of the car. And as we drive along, the car shakes and bounces and whatever else, is just like you normally do. But because there was no space, my knees were banging between this post and seats. And I didn't know what was happening for a while. I just knew I had these massive bruises on the inside of my knees all of a sudden. And then I finally figured out what was causing it. We're sharing high elementary school trauma. Anyways, if Crawford and coming to disrupt his work, he didn't run afoul of him again that month. Finally, though, as the paycheck came in, Hydra was able to buy a finely bound empty book to record his mostly loose notes. He was really doing it. He was going to make the grimoire to break the Everwinter. Okay. Now we got to spend our gold and do ourselves a discover. So discover requires us to spend 2 coin. So it's gone. We had it, and it's gone. Witcher says, yeah, cars are often terrible, especially affordable ones. I feel bad, too, because, like, when you talk about, like, you know, I just need a reliable car and I can't spend too much money, people bring up Hondas, and it's fair. Hondas are generally quite well-made cars. They've had their misses on certain models, but in general, they're pretty well made as far as their price point goes, but they're made for the Japanese, and it shows. Like, it's so hard for me to drive. Them. I do tend to drive Volvos for that reason, by the way. They are cheap and reliable, but they are built for Nordic folk. Samuel says, I'm surprised you're using the imperial system, not the metric system when referring to your height witchery. That's actually pretty common in Canada, too. We sort of hybridize it. Yeah. It's weird how different places play that out. I think that temperature, Celsius, is the better mode. I realize that that's not really a provable thing, it's just opinion, but I do feel like it's more intuitive that zero's the freezing point. I think grams are much better than the rather confusing system of ounces and pounds. But I will say that when it comes to a human height, centimeters or meters just never really nails it. Okay. So we remove 2 coins and we draw and play a face card. So these are our face cards. We got ourselves a Queen of Diamonds. Our first spell, chat. In the future when I play this, the hope is that I'll get through a spell each episode. Because I won't have to re-explain the rules. Or maybe I will, I don't know. Hopefully I won't. So the face card of the Queen is a 12, so our first spell is a 12 Queen. Now I'm gonna write this in my little gaming book because that's kind of what they encourage you to do. So I apologize that this isn't very interesting, but I'll show you in a minute. You'll see how bad my handwriting is. I have very poor writing. Grimoire. To break. The ever stylize Everwinter a bit. Why not? It's a little too stylized, I think. It's kind of hard to read. Also mixing. Okay, well that could be much better, but whatever. Grimoire to break the Everwinter. And our first spell, which we might lose, is a Queen of Diamonds. Okay. Now watch the deck say we botched it. Well, we can still botch it. It's a long process to build a spell, so we won't be able to finish it today. But here's how it works. Okay. So we have a Queen of Diamonds here. Now when we play cards, we have other actions we can take. We can do some research and risk some madness, or we can do some questing and risk a bunch of things that could happen. But in that, when we pull those cards now, we can put those cards towards trying to complete this spell. and we keep it like a little deck of cards. So like, so far we've pulled a 3, a 4, and a 5 of different suits, right? And we're trying to get up to 12. So we could have put these cards, if these were actions like quest or research, we could have put these cards to this card as a total of 7 plus, no wait, 8 plus 4. Oh, it would have been 12. We could have put those cards towards it. And I don't remember if the suits matter on the cards, but we would have finished the spell, right, with our prompt cards, because it would have equaled 12, and then we would write out the spell and we'd use the book to do a prompt. You know, my temptation is to just push forward and make a spell, but I think actually I'm kind of out of time. But that's the beginnings of our first spell. I don't think we do anything more at this point. Let me double check. If we don't, then I'll read back what we got. And I'd say we're on our way. And then I'm going to ask you guys a question about what we should play next week. So please don't let me forget. Yeah, okay. Nope, that's all you do. You just spend your 2 coin, you get the beginning of a spell. Okay, I haven't noted Queen of Diamonds because obviously I'm going to have to use this deck for other things. But yes. I'm definitely coming back to this. I'm sorry if you were hoping we would get further. I will, just in case people are watched all of this and they wanted to see the spells and how they worked, I will show you how it works in detail. So I can at least sort of keep that promise. So, the face card determines how many spell points are required. We got a queen, which is a 12. We then use research or quest. Research risks going crazy, and quest risks a bunch of different things. It's prompts and stuff. I mean, obviously, questing is the main thing that you want to be doing. And you get cards. So I'm just going to use the cards that I have because they happen to total 12. The first number card determines the words of power, so that would have been a 3. And the last number card, which was a 5, determines which value of your wizard... Oh, sorry, it's a hearts, rather. Which value your wizard is using to interpret those words of power. So this is where we added in our... Also, as an American, I can guarantee anyone who even knows how to measure in ounces and not pounds is very familiar with using the kitchen scale, but not for baking, if you know what I mean. Yeah, well, yeah, that's a bit of a different history. So we got a heart here and peace. So our value was peace. Yeah, the fractions, if you do any work that involves socket sets, I don't know how you can defend Imperial. It's so annoying. You're like 3/16, and the next size up is a 1632s, and what is this? In metric, it's just another number. It's like 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it means peace. If we were doing this as our spell, okay? So, determines the words of power. Now, the words of power is the thing I haven't explained, and I think it's cool, so I'm going to do it here. But know that this is non-canonical. To find the words of power, open your chosen reading book to a random page and look for a number of words in sequence equal to the rank of the card played to the set, which was a 3. So I go to my book, I go like that, I open it, and I look for a sequence of 3 words that kind of seems like it could be something about you know, our goals here, which is to break the Everwinter. It's a lot of food, Joe. Okay, I have quickly dissipating heat. So let's put that in. Just as a memory for myself. Quickly dissipating heat. And we look at it with our value of peace. So what you do is you use the value to apply meaning to the words of power, rearrange the words or remove words until you're satisfied with the meaning of the spell, then write it down and create a name. So what we would do, again, I'm doing this quite quickly. What we would do is we would say quickly dissipating heat. We can move this around. Again, this is a prompt system, not like a point or a constraining system. And you know, we could say, okay, maybe let's make it quick heat is the spell. And looked at through the specter of peace, maybe it's related to like a calming force, or not forest fire, a calming bonfire or something like that, or a campfire. So it's like the ability to summon a little campfire. Witchery says words of power, but consider rings of power. I controversially do not hate that series. I get it. I get the complaints. I do think that it still has value. I know that that is going to lose me so much credit among my Tolkien fans. I will say I'm also not particularly interested in debating it because it's just a matter of taste. Reflect on the relevant journal entries to identify a tribulation related to the determined value or represent the offering of the spell. So this is what we can't duplicate right now, which is those cards would have represented questing and research. Yeah, okay, well, there you go. Then we're on the same page, Witchery. That's the way I felt like it. Witchery says, I enjoyed it. People should be able to make their own stories in the world. He's super dead. Yes, exactly. Like, people treat it like it's these sort of adaptations, like they have like some sort of backwards. To be honest, it's pretty faithful. The thing it's not faithful on is something that I don't think would have ever worked in any medium other than a novel. And that is, you can't just time jump 200 years and drop all the characters except the elves that you got to know. So they just didn't. They did it in a much shorter time, and it's weird. And it does take some of the magic and mystery away from it. Zombie Wolf says clicks, unsubscribes forever. I probably will lose subscribers on that. People get really way too defensive of it. Like, would I recommend it over like reading the Silmarillion or something? Which is kind of what it's doing. It's not really the Silmarillion. It's taking the footnotes or the endnotes from Lord of the Rings, but the endnotes of Lord of the Rings are basically what the Silmarillion builds on. They don't have the rights to the Silmarillion. But it's basically the Silmarillion. Like, if you want to read it, go read it. If you're that deep in the sauce, have fun. Yeah, that's true. Witchery says they can't be faithful because the estate won't unhand the Silmarillion. But also, there's so much about the Silmarillion that's not going to work in any visual medium. It barely works as a book, to be completely honest. I do think it'd be cool to see the formation of the world and the music battle and all of that stuff. But, well, I don't know what the music battle would be other than choruses and a void. But but yeah, no, I don't know. I'm getting Tolkien distracted, and that's the worst kind of distracted because it never ends. Discard all the cards except the face card, which is then added to the goal set at the top of the table, which is something I've never talked about it so far. But basically, we collect enough spells and we complete our goal set. I'm not going to give the mechanical details of that right now. When we complete our goal set, that's like the happy ending. So basically, you get a good sense of the game now. Yeah. So that's how I feel about it. Witchery says, listen, Tolkien spinning in his grave would power the world forever if we could harness it, but all stories are ultimately shared or died. Would you say the road goes on and on? Yes. That's the way I feel about it. Like, you know, obviously the question of like, what would he think of these things? To be honest, you'd be surprised how much stuff you probably like if you're a Tolkien fan and stuff that he wouldn't have liked. He never wanted to give his stuff up to movies, period. I don't know that he was quite as virulent about it as Huxley was about adaptation to film, but he didn't like it. He did it because he needed money. And he wouldn't have liked the Jackson movies that we are so beloved of and stuff like that. Like he just wasn't into it. But it doesn't matter because his books exist. You can always read them. They're not going away. These are different things. Yeah, Jackson's really wasn't that faithful. I mean, people make, I think, the fair point that Jackson's captured the spirit more, but then I feel like they didn't in The Hobbit. I do think The Lord of the Rings worked pretty well. But like, even when, I'll be honest, I was there. When the Lord of the Rings movies came out, you know what, like, the little listservs and stuff about Tolkien were talking about? They were talking about, where's Tom Bombadil? He ruined it. He's a load-bearing pillar of the narrative, and so on, which is, you know, it's just not true. Yep. Anyways, this is neither here nor there. You know my feelings on copyright. Stories are meant to be told. The point is, when you complete a spell, you tell a little story about it, you put that spell in your goal set, and that's the gist of the game. Here is the overview of this whole game that I intend to come back to and play more. You live a life of a wizard who encounters people, friends that he eventually loses, enemies he eventually defeats or just disappear for one reason or another, during which he gains wounds and he nearly goes mad and so on. And he tries to collect up gold to complete his goal. And throughout that, there's this jokers in the deck that cycle through and can end his project early. Why would you want to play it? It's pretty straightforward. You either think that's an interesting concept and want to be a wizard making your own spell book, and you like the idea that there is lore behind these spells, or you are someone trying to create maybe a more interesting frame for the mechanics of a tabletop RPG, whatever that may be, whether you're doing like old school stuff or whether you're doing some dated edition of D&D or whatever. At the end of the day, if I came up with a spell that was called, you know, Quick Heat or something like that, or Quick Dissipation was another thing we could have gone, I might just take like a Catch Flame or something like that as a, is that the name of it? I'm getting a Firebolt or something maybe. But anyways, I could just recast the mechanics and re-describe the mechanics of an existing spell in the system, and then put these in some spell book that, I don't know, you could say your character found, or it was inherited down through the family, and he was the wizard who broke the Everwinter, and then you get some backstory flavor and stuff. That's really what the game is aimed towards creating. And I think that's fun, but if you think that's pointless, that's fine. There's like tons of other games. Witchery says The Hobbit is a travesty with some fun scenes. Yeah. I do feel like if there is a version where you cut out a bunch of stuff and you make a 2-movie one, that probably would have worked better. I didn't hate all the new stuff, but I just don't see it adding much. Witchery said, Hobbits didn't exist at this time. They're ancestors. That's true. In fact, the story that they're telling with the Hobbits there is about how the different sort of family groups develop. Smeagol wasn't an actual hobbit. That is true. That's the kind of hair splitting that I look for in my fandom. Also, Tolkien did ultimately want to create a mythology, but I think he never got it to a point where he was comfortable with other authors writing for it. Of course. Yeah, but again, you don't need an author's permission. They are dead. The way I put it is like, we don't know who wrote most of the classics of Western literature. We don't know who wrote Homer, Odyssey, or anything like that. Is that the one I'm thinking of? We don't know who wrote Beowulf, anyways. And even if we did, I doubt we'd care. I doubt if somebody came along and said, Sir Royston, who wrote Beowulf, was a staunch anti-Finn, and I don't think you should have Finns cast in Beowulf. You'd be like, I don't care. This is like a millennia-old grievance. Thranduil was fabulous. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I liked elements that they introduced. I just don't know that it all gelled together. Okay. Let's read what we came up with, folks, and then call it a day. Is it worth it for me to read from the beginning? I guess so. Why not? I did say people can just jump ahead, and they didn't need to go back and watch the other one. If you're coming to this part of the show, it's because you just want to know what we came up with. And what we came up with was an extension on our story about our wizard creating a grimoire to break the Everwinter. And what all that means, I'll explain, because I'm going to reread the beginning that we wrote last week, and then I'm going to read our new section as well. Anyways, yeah, I don't want to waste too much time, but Grimoire, I do recommend it, by the way, if you're interested in the concept of becoming a wizard and living his life as he tries to create a spell book towards a goal. It can be any goal you want. I think the system is interesting. I think that it has the right mix of mechanics, but still quite focused towards story. It didn't feel too cumbersome to deal with. All you really need is a deck of cards. Dice are nice, but not required. And obviously the game itself, which I should have linked in the comments below. If I don't, somebody remind me. After it's live, after it's no longer live. Can't put a comment on a live video. So let's read what we came up with. The first time Hadrenius heard the prophecy of the Everwinter, he stayed awake for 3 days, terrified about all he might lose to it, until at last he finally collapsed in exhaustion and slept with his head on his mother's lap for 16 hours. I'm going to put on my fairy tale music. This feels more fairy tale-ish. Which one? There we go. At least that is how he tells it. Whether every detail of this story was true, one could never be sure. Hadrenius, or Hydra to his friends, was a talented wizard, but an insecure person prone to lies that emphasized his endless distress in all pursuits. Nevertheless, what we could know with certainty is just by looking upon his life's direction is that the prophecy of the Everwinter truly did disturb and scar the boy. The prophecy itself was an old one. It stated that in a 10-year period, the seas would begin to freeze longer and longer each winter until finally all water would be as stone and all grass would be wilted in the frost. It particularly hung on the mind of the young Hydra because in the years since he'd heard it, the sea froze. The sea returned a tide of slush for the first time. Let me reorder that. It was debatable what caused the freezing tide, though it definitely could not have been the Everwinter. The sea remained unfrozen the following winter, in contrast to the prediction of the Doom prophecy, but Hydra remained convinced of the imminent threat and already began his pursuits of the natural magics. Hydra saw this magic as a path to resurrection, a counter to the prophecy he feared so inevitable. Though the days grew colder as he finished his schooling, there were no indications of the Everwinter's arrival in his time there. Still, fear is a bond, as strong as any and one disinterested in consideration. Fear was also a powerful motivator, and in his obsession born of nightmares, Hydronius began work on the grimoire to break the Everwinter. And this is the tale of how he wrote his seminal work that ruined so much of his life. Long before any spells were written, Hydra was merely a cog in a machine that made his master money. His master was the city of Frostvale's municipal lighting division. The outer farms all still used oil lamps, but in the city, each lamppost was crowned with a light gem that emanated a magical glow. It was beautiful, and the colors could be altered to match the spirits of the city in any season. The drawback was they were quite fragile and often dimmed or cracked. Recent graduates of the Tonsforth School of Magic often interned in the role of effectively a magical lamplighter. Interned in this role of repairing them, let's say, as effectively a magical lamplighter. It was a simple but tedious task of casting the same spell over the course of an hour, then moving to the next broken lamp to do the same. It was a rite of passage to many graduates, but to Hydra it was an insult and a waste of his precious time. Folks of Frostvale would speak kind words of greeting to the young wizard as he pouted about casting his mending spell, and he would rarely respond. The most anyone got was a huff and a nod. Mostly, though, he would just pretend to be overly focused on the task at hand. Hydra hated this menial work, but he needed the gold, or his book of spells would never grow, and the Everwinter would bring its ruin inevitably. It was in this fugue state of angry muttering while wandering to the next cracked light orb that Hydra heard the nasal screeching of an old classmate and general jackass, Crafeld Newton, or the Diviner, as he called himself. The screech was, of course, mockery, the only thing he knew how to... the only thing he ever spoke. Oh dear, aren't you finished that damn light yet? I guess it's tough to persuade the dirt of the earth to lend you power, because a diviner would have had this whole street done hours ago. The most infuriating thing to Hydra about Crawfeld's statement is that it was technically correct, and to explain the nuance to the now curious crowd would sound like little more than defensive rambling and hair-splitting. For example, while it was true that drawing power from natural sources led to longer casting times, it was generally a more stable and powerful form of magic. None of this would have mattered, though, to either Crawfeld or the pedestrians encircling the scene. It was the worst kind of insult, technically, because it was technically correct, but overall wrong. Adding to this tension was the fact that Hydra was in city uniform and on the clock, which meant he couldn't just say whatever he wanted, as what he wanted to say was a fireable offense. Instead, with a smile stretched over gritted teeth, Hydra said, "You're welcome to do some civil service, or any work at all, Crawfish. Though I'm sure you have several of your dad's parties to attend instead." I hiss of whispers ran through the crowd. Most of Hydra's insults seemed to fall flat, but everyone knew that Crawfeld hated being called Crawfish. It was a stupid name that had followed him since childhood. There was a tense moment where a chill wind blew in off the sea and between the two men who were locked in a rageful stare. Then, with a flick of his wrist, Crawfeld lit the last 3 lamps in as many minutes. To prove his point. Then he gave a smirk to the crowd and said, "Have pity for the boy. His mistake of natural magic robs him of the time to go to parties, I guess. But for me, I've done a day's work, supposedly, in minutes. So now it's time to do a day's worth of rest." Crawfeld swaggered off and the crowd in tow as lowly Hydra stood under the lamps he lit, fuming with rage. Then, as was often the case with diviner magic, the orb burst and dropped its leaded glass on his scalp, a wound that would turn to a scar and a forced part in his hair over time. Much of the remaining weeks of summer were spent lighting these lamps, but now with the added misery of looking over his shoulder to see if Crawfeld was coming to disrupt his work again. He didn't run afoul of him again that month, though. Finally, though, as the paycheck came in, Hydra was able to buy a finely bound empty book to record his mostly loose notes. He was really doing it. He was going to make the grimoire to break the Everwinter. That's as far as we got. We did go through how to make a spell. If you were looking for that, go to the timestamp for this and then go back like 5 minutes. I see we are still bitter about it. What I will say at Jump Store is it got better views than that, but that doesn't really matter. If it didn't get views, they wouldn't be making it another season anyways. But like you're welcome to hate it. I definitely, it's not like I watched that show and I was like, anyone would be a fool to hate this. Like I can understand where the liberties they've taken would be contrary to what people want. I definitely wish it was better, but it's also the first season of a show, and the first season of a show is rarely the best season. That's really uncommon. For the most part, it's people figuring out what the show is and how to pace things and what people like and whatever else. But that said, I just don't think it's for everybody, as with all things. But I think, I think that sense of like we need to protect the legacy is just, I mean, we know my feelings. I just don't think it's good for art. I don't. I think that it's a way of gatekeeping creativity in a way that we have nothing left. And I already see that kind of happening, and it concerns me. Anyways, Lord of the Rings will enter the public domain, and it will be, like all the stories before it, quite different. You know, they made a Winnie the Pooh horror movie, and Tammy enjoyed it. It didn't blow up Winnie the Pooh. It'll be fine. As for me, I'm really warm. I don't know if you notice, but I'm sweaty. Jumpstore, I hope your migraine feels better. I know that's 2 weeks now. It's been haunting you. I really do hope it feels better. And Zombie Wolf, I'm looking for a fun fact or whatever, and I don't see it. This is your last warning. I'm going to say goodbye to some people, and then I got to go. Witchery, GS. I think we lost Big Drew. But Big Drew, if you're out there, thank you very much for stopping by. It was good to see you again. And Tammy, I don't know if you're out watching your dog or anything, but if you are, thank you very much for watching and giving some recommendations. The question that I have, there was a fact upstream. Can you repost it, Zombie Wolf? There's just too many posts now about people complaining about Lord of the Rings. I don't want to sort through it all. I know that's an unfair burden on you, but if you could repost it, I'll read it. And Witchery, of course, I really hope you can defeat that terrible cough and get your life back as much as you're able. We'll complain about tall people problems next time. I will say this. I feel a kinship with the two extremes, right? I feel a kinship with really short, and really tall people. Because normal people, the world's built for them. They don't get it. Witcher said, I made a joke and started a war in my bed. No, that's okay. That's just how this chat goes. Don't worry about it. It's not you. It's us. It's all of us. We're weirdly emphatic about subjective things. I don't know. We found each other. What can I say? It's not the end of the world. I hope nobody is ruining their day over these things. But anyways, so my question to you folks is, what is, of the stuff that we've kind of set up, what is something you would want to see, again, because we're coming into August, and in August, that's kind of my chance to just kind of do whatever, because August, everyone's on vacation. Numbers fall away. So we can do whatever. Like, I can go back and do more of Swamp Troll Riches, which is one I enjoyed. I don't know how much chat enjoys that, though. You let me know. Obviously, I know the most popular one is the Floating Bookshop. But like I said, I try to line that up with certain seasonal things. Maybe late August, I could do another Floating Bookshop. In late August, early September. I mean, the latest I'll be doing another Floating Bookshop is September. Zombie Wolf says, random trivia. In the spirit of the Olympics in 2006, a Norwegian coach was gifted 5.2 tons of maple syrup out of gratitude because he gave a ski pole to a Canadian skier who went on to win a silver medal. That is way more money than you would expect, by the way, if that was pure maple syrup. Wow. Very cool. That is a really fun fact. Anyways. We can even... I won't be doing it next week because I don't want to do 3 weeks in a row, but we can even come back to this. We can come back to the Solar Punk one we were doing. Yeah, let me know. Let me know what you want to see more of that we've done repeats of. We could even try that delve that we created, and you can see what I did with it. I'm still trying to learn some systems so I can publish it for folks. Anyways, folks, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Thank you for watching, but get out of my shop.